Host. Thank you so much for showing up to our live stream we're doing here every Wednesday, every Sunday as well. We do Sunday at Mike's. I've decided to call this a Wednesday hump for now. That's as best of a title as I can come up with. And I do appreciate you showing up and taking time to watch. Now, whether you're watching this live right now or if you're going to watch this in the rerun, I do appreciate you taking the time to do so. It's very important to me that I let you know that I appreciate you spending your valuable time and engage with this channel, and I appreciate it. Thank you. Well, with that out of the way, how is everybody doing out there? Ben in the house, sir. How are you doing? I'm so glad you showed up to listen in. Um, yeah, Michael's in the house, Mr. Watson in the house. Well, we're waiting for other people to get into the live stream. I'll talk about a subject that's very interesting to me. As you know, recently I talked about my Matty Two House in the house. Welcome. As you know, I talked about my reverb shop that I have. I've had it for a number of years now, and how I've just come to the conclusion that it's time pretty much for to shut it down, let it go. Dewey's in the house. Welcome, Dewey. And when I conclude this little bit of missing a parcel, which is it's got tracking on it, so we kind of know where it's at. Hopefully, it'll get back here so that I can get it to the guy who got it, who paid for it. I want him to have it. As soon as I get that squared away, I'm just closing the whole thing down. But today, I got an offer on this. Actually, put this Squire Strat up for sale on Reverb. You guys are familiar with this one. And I got an offer that said, along with the offer order processing system. Hi, the buyer paid for your item. Interesting. But since your profile is not verified, your store is temporarily able to accept new orders. Interesting. Click the link below so you can get authorization. And I was like, screw you. I'm not clicking anything. It's not going to happen. And first of all, the way that system works is, if you anyway, it's never happened to me before. I've never had this kind of message come up. If somebody wants to make an offer, usually you counter or you accept, and then they have a certain amount of time to pay it, and then you have a certain amount of time to ship it to them with a proof of a shipping label. And once that is received by them, then you receive payment. That's how Reverb works. This thing, I have no idea what it is, and whether it's a real thing or not. And all the years that I've been doing Reverb, I've never had it happen or given to me that way or explained to me in such a weird way. This item's already been paid for. It's like, I don't care. I didn't accept that offer for it, so they can do whatever. And so scamming, whether it's a scam or not, I will leave that open. I don't care. I will treat it as such. And yet, reason 3,334 why I'm not going to be doing any business on Reverb anymore. It's just getting. It's really a symptom of the times. I look at the news and I look at things that are going on in my country, United States, my home country, and I'm just amazed because these are things that not too many years ago would be unthinkable. And so it really is something to me to take that kind of environment and just say, hey, it's going to be reflective in a lot of different things. And unfortunately, Reverb, some would argue it's been for years now, is one of those things that it's just turned into just something that you really shouldn't avoid. It's getting a little sleazy. James in the house. Welcome. How are you? Welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you and to everybody else wherever this live stream finds you in the time of day. Thank you so much for showing up. I do appreciate it. So yeah, there was that. I just said no, no, thank you, and just said no. But yeah, it just really reinforced my decision to get off reverb. It's really more trouble than it's worth, and it's just something that I just don't want to really deal with. So there's that. Um, all right, how are we doing here? We are doing good. Let me have I done my adjustments? My hair is looking a little wild here. Yeah, this looks good. All right, and you guys can hear me obviously very well. Very well. We'll move ahead then. I've got a lot of ground to cover tonight, actually. And I have very dry eyes right now for some reason. The weather outside has been blowing in a lot of pollen, and it's just playing havoc with me. Anthony in the house, what's up? How you doing? Glad you could show up. Um, we're just getting started here. So tonight's live stream is what are lawsuit made in Japan guitars, and are they any good? We got a lot of ground to cover tonight. We have a lot of ground to cover tonight with this one. And my answer to these questions posed here are going to be probably maybe not to the regulars, but to anybody new tuning into this, it's probably going to be surprising uh, because it is not going to be the answer that you hear out there in general. I'm noticing when I was doing my research, just tightening up a few facts I had to remember. Again, I take facts and things that I read. The things that I find interesting, I put them in a mental file called the file. And that's something, that's interesting. Maybe I'll get back to it later. But I had to kind of resurrect some of those thoughts and kind of just uh, see if this is the assumptions that are out there about lawsuit guitars are really real, if they're valid. It's actually warm in here tonight, so I'm going to take my sweater off. That's a good thing because it's been freezing here in Amsterdam the last few days. All right, so you hear about Grecos, Tokais, Ibanez, Yamahas, Bernies, when you hear about the term lawsuit guitars. And Bernie is a funny one. I don't know if you guys know the story. If I told, I'm sure I've told it before, but I'll tell it again. The Japanese guys who were designing the Bernie guitars, they actually wanted to call them Bunny, but to their ears, when they hear Bunny, they heard Bernie, Bernie Rabbit. That's a true story. And they spelled it the way that they heard it. So instead of Bunny, they ended up being Bernie. And that's actually a true story. But when you hear about these lawsuit era guitars, what does that really mean? And why is it that there seems to be a premium out there, or at least when they're presented in advertisements as being a premium placed on these particular guitars for some reason? And what is that reason? Does anybody really know why that is? Or do they just assume and, the lawsuit guitars, that's something. Oh, there was a lawsuit. Well, we'll get to that. We'll get to that. But I do want to cover, and I have my notes here, a little precarious because I write them. I handwrite my notes mostly because as I'm cooking or if I'm doing something else and I have my little notebook here and I'll think of something and I'll jot it down. It's a little old-fashioned, but it works. Seamus in the house. How you doing, sir? Welcome. So glad to have you here, Seamus. You'll like this one tonight. We're going to dispel some myths tonight. You know, we're going to dispel some myths tonight. But I don't want to spoil the lead here, so I will take this systematically and just do a little refresher course out there for those of you who may not be initiated in the history behind the so-called lawsuit guitars. And so I say, grab a drink, grab some popcorn, and we're going to dig into this tonight. Take some time because there are some interesting parallels to today's market in this story. There is a lot of disinformation for different reasons in this story. Uh, there is a lot of is it the Chinese whisper? Chinese whisper. You say something and you pass it on down, and by the time it gets to the end, it's not the original sentence. There's a lot of Chinese whispering going on in this story. We'll put it that way. Wiley Bernard Kyles, President CEO. Copy of the original or just too close? Yeah, we're going to get into that. And welcome to the live stream. Glad to have you chiming in and giving your opinion on things. We say the more the merrier here. So there was a gentleman named Harry Rosenblum. Harry Rosenblum. All this starts back with a guy named Harry Rosenblum, believe it or not. You're welcome, and truly welcome. Now, dear old Harry lived in Pennsylvania, and he was a businessman circa the 1950s. As a matter of fact, in 1954, he opened up a music shop called Medley Music. Now, from that time until around 1964 or so, there was a guitar boom. At first, it was brought about by Buddy Holly, Elvis Presley, that era of music. And then, of course, folk music following that, a strong demand for acoustic guitars. And here's where one of those parallels comes about. There was so much of a demand for acoustic guitars that there was a 3-year wait in order to get don't see it in my notes. I'm sorry, guys, about that. There was a 3-year wait to get Martins. I'm sorry. That's what it was, Martins. Should have put that in my notes. And there's a parallel there because that's about as long of a wait that you're going to have if you want something from their custom shop these days. So, dear old Harry found himself in a bind. He had a music shop that was booming, but he had no inventory. So he reached out to a local violin maker who said to him, hey, my son and I, we can make acoustic guitars. And Harry, being an astute businessman, saw an opportunity there. So he created a company called Elgin Guitars. And this guitar company that he initially developed was really focusing in on acoustic guitars. Not a lot of electrics in there. This changed with the British invasion around 1964. Things kind of flopped there. And historically, you can see that too. Frederick Rogers in the house, welcome. Where that change over from folk to electric, even in the cases of Bob Dylan, who was considered the god of folk music at that time, and Joni Mitchell when she switched over to electric, that was considered to be like a desecration of folk, amongst the pure folkies. And but there was that big turn in terms of popularity of the music. It really, folk music is okay, man, but a cat strumming an acoustic guitar is not exactly the same thing as a guy with an electric on stage with a stack of Marshalls. It's a whole different thing, you know. It reminds me of that scene from Animal House where the guy's sitting on the steps playing his acoustic guitar, and John Belushi comes by, grabs it, and smashes it against the wall. It's that was kind of the sentiment at that time. And Harry saw the writing on the wall with that. And so he formed Elgar Music Guitars, and he toyed with this concept for a number of years with these gentlemen building him acoustics, but he began to discover that the margins were very low, because the cost in order to produce these guitars, in this case acoustic guitars, in the United States was far too much for him to really make a decent margin at the end. So he kind of cut that business off. He stopped really dealing with it. Actually, early 60s, he kind of stopped doing that. And he took a look around and the world, and he saw that the Japanese were producing pretty nice guitars. Not great, not great, not great, but pretty nice guitars that were economical. And he looked at a company called Hoshino Gaki Gin, which is the company who owns the guitar line Ibanez. Ibanez. And he decided to partner up with them. They had a 50-50 split where Hoshino would be the partner with Elgar Guitars, with Elgar Guitars being the exclusive North American distributor for these Hoshino guitars, primarily Ibanez. Primarily Ibanez. Now, Japanese imports were good, and they had a low labor cost at that time. And again, here we draw in a parallel to today. Well, actually, for a while. We've talked about how that low labor cost caused that trend that we're talking about tonight, going from the States to Japan, to Korea, to China, to Indonesia, and to India to some extent now, and I believe that India will grow. There will be Indian Epiphones at some point. But so this system worked very well. It worked so well that eventually Hashino bought out Harry. Okay. And this happened in the early 70s. So, that explosion of rock music, that British invasion, the demand, this was um, a time where, it was the hot period. It was the spark that we're kind of living off the fumes of today. But this was the heat of the moment, and they did so well that Hashino bought old Harry out. Now, Harry uh, still had his music store. As a matter of fact, his music store, which opened in 1954, closed in 2008. So it had a long history. So the original shop that started all of this uh, had a long life from 1954 to 2008. But it's interesting that you can trace really the influx of Japanese guitars to this one guy, in a way, and in a strong way, in a very strong way. This would be the godfather in a way, or the guy that we should look to and say, "Hey, this is the guy who really brought the Japanese imports to the forefront in the United States." Buck, wow, welcome, Buck. Hello, first tuning in. Glad to be here. You're talking about Greco or generally Japanese guitars? Well, we're talking about lawsuit guitars. We're looking at that term lawsuit guitars because you hear that a lot. If you go on Reverb, hey, we've got a 19 whatever lawsuit guitar here, and they'll put that in the title as if there is some kind of premium or if there's some kind of meaning to that. And I am questioning tonight and presenting to you my reasons why it's nonsense. Oh, I've blown the lead there. Doggone it, you made me do it, Buck. But I'm going through the process of really giving a background history of where did this start anyway? How did the Japanese get to the point where they were even so hot to trot on American reproductions, copies of Gibson's, Fenders, and actually Rickenbacker's as well was the number three one that they copied the most. Why is that? Well, it all started with old dear Harry Rosenblum. And so Harry's out of the picture now. Now we only have Hashino with Ibanez. So that was in 1971. Hashino bought out Rosenblum. Now, really, this period from 1970. See, you have guys out there who will say they'll make a statement. Well, is this pre-lawsuit or post-lawsuit? This guitar, as this lawsuit thing is the dividing line, you know, between whether a guitar is favorable or not favorable, depending upon what you're drinking that day, I suppose. But you could argue, and even in that, it's a silly thing to say because they point to 1977 as being the lawsuit year, and we're going to get to 1977 here in a minute. But I would hesitate not to mention this fact that Hoshino from 1970 was making copies of Fender guitars, exact copies. Now, were the electronics good? No, they were crap. Was the wood equivalent? No, it was terrible. It was not the equivalent of woods. It was whatever, you know. These early lawsuit guitars are not great. I mean, they're interesting in themselves, but if you're saying that statement, oh, it's as good as that, good as, you know, whatever that means. Uh, um, it's not true at all, you know, especially in those early ones. But you could argue that 1977 or 1970, excuse me, was the beginning of the lawsuit guitar era. Okay, so there's that. Now, um, let's get to the lawsuit. This lawsuit. Now, people will tell you that Gibson sued Ibanez. And this lawsuit was settled out of court, and that's how that went. But no, that is not what happened. So, first of all, there was no lawsuit. There was no lawsuit. So when somebody out there starts talking about a lawsuit guitar, ask them what lawsuit. Now, there was a cease and desist order that Gibson drew up. At that time, it was the Norland Corporation. Remember, they had bought the original Gibson guys out. There was a Norman. Norland, the famous 1970 pancake guitars, which was the reason why the Japanese guitars were doing so well in the first place, which is the irony of this. Um, the funny thing is that 70s guitars now are coming up as being vintage. And those will, those much maligned and hated 70s Gibsons will have their day in the vintage market. But I digress. Um, they had a cease and desist order that Gibson, the Norland Corporation, drew up against the Hoshino group. Okay. Hoshino had Fujigin Gaki producing Ibanez guitars. We've talked about the Fujigin factory. We've had examples of guitars in here on this show that were made in the Fujigin factory. We talked about that quite a bit from that time period. But and the cease and desist order was primarily over the headstocks on Ibanez guitars, primarily a model that came out in 1977 called the Ibanez Super Standard Les Paul. It had, the open book, headstock that Gibsons had, identical. And they filed a cease and desist order against that particular headstock in this using that guitar as a particular case. But that is not a lawsuit. There's a big difference between a cease and desist order and a lawsuit if you're not clear on that concept. So that means that there was no lawsuit. So that means there's no such thing as a lawsuit guitar. It's completely a bogus. It's again something that I talk about quite frequently on this channel about these behind the stage after midnight having a cigar with somebody or a cigarette with somebody, guitar player, like, hey man, did you hear about those lawsuits that Gibson totally threw up against those Japanese guitars because they were so awesome? and, and that somehow over the decades has become the story, but there is no truth to that at all. There's no truth to it. There was no lawsuit. It was a cease and desist order. And interestingly enough, that cease and desist order came about in 1977. In 1977 and going into 1978, Ibanez had already changed their headstock. They had already made that decision. Hey, guys, maybe this is cutting the line a bit too fast, or we're doing so well, we can do our own thing, which is probably the truth of it, and we don't need to do this anymore. And so the cease and desist order was obviously, negated by the fact that they no longer continue to do those kind of copies with that headstock. Not the body, not the neck, not the pickups, not any of that stuff. It always comes down to that headstock, if you notice, because Gibson really holds on to that. They wanted, back then, they were thinking, boys, we can't wait until 2024 when we can charge an upcharge on this headstock when we start having these bad boys made in China ourselves. Yeah. So they held on to that headstock thing pretty seriously, obviously, for obvious reasons. They then and to this day consider a premium on it, the headstock design. So that's the fact of it. So that's the first thing. That's the first part of that. What are lawsuit made in Japan guitars? And you know, you know, for Gibson so many parallels here. First, we talked about how Rosenblum found that the cost of producing guitars was just so onerous in terms of his margins that he sought to have them produced outside of the country in Japan. Solved a lot of problems for him, specifically with him just being the distributor. It cut out the need for really his own music store. You know, to really play a big role. It put a bigger role on this merger with Hoshino, and it worked out, paid off in spades. A lot of, but again, that jumping economically to the lowest import denominator. And this pattern's been going around since the 1950s. It's nothing new. Um, Obviously, it's nothing new, and I found that interesting. Um, and But I just find that whole so again, when you hear that pre or post lawsuit guitar, again, ask that person what lawsuit, because my understanding is there was a cease and desist order that was negated by the fact that I against Ibanez. you know, if you know the facts of it, you know the history of it, then again the magic is fallen off of the headline. You can read and decipher the headline with a little bit of knowledge, then you can again look at that with, not such rose tinted glasses. Because people tend to look at these made in Japan guitars with rose tinted glasses, regardless of which ones they are. And of course, because of this success that Ibanez was having, uh, other companies like Greco and Bernie and Yamaha and the others that we're familiar with began to do this as well, which leads to the next point of this regarding these so-called pre and post lawsuit guitars is the fact that even though the cease and desist order was negated by the fact that Ibanez stopped using those open book headstocks on their export guitars. It doesn't mean that they didn't stop doing it domestically. Now, I have just recently purchased and waiting to be shipped to me one of the so it was so funny, even in the Japanese text in terms of the description of this guitar when I was looking at it from the shop I bought it from. It was describing it as a lawsuit guitar. So even in Japan, they're like, "Hey, you know," if it was in English, I'd have been like, "Okay, you guys, let's get these, gaijing and tell them it was a lawsuit guitar." But no, even amongst them, that's something, and there's nothing to it. They should know. You would think that they would know, but again, that backstage talk, man, it's powerful. But those headstocks were produced domestically. I played, I bought in this Yamaha Studio Lord 700 that I just purchased in its original case from 1980 has the open book headstock on it. And people will tell you that the open book headstock guitars that make their way out of Japan over the decades, that these are lawsuit guitars because they have the Gibson headstock on. Well, no. Again, there was no lawsuit. There was a cease and desist order against it, but the Americans at that time, they didn't care about the one or two that the servicemen would bring over. They've been doing that since the 50s and the 60s anyway, so they weren't really concerned with that blowing their blowing their market share. No, that wasn't something that they were concerned about. However, as time progressed, that did become an issue. And but at no time was there a lawsuit until the year 2000 when Gibson sued Fernandez. You guys know that lawsuit? Are you familiar with the fact that Gibson sued Fernandez? Japanese company, again for infringement of design infringement. In this case, it was a real lawsuit. See, this is the lawsuit. If you want to look for an American guitar maker lawsuit against a Japanese company, you're not looking at 1977, you're looking at 2000. So, gee, I guess every guitar before 2000 is a pre lawsuit guitar, and every one after that. See, again, it's nonsense. When you shine a spotlight on it, it falls into nonsense. It's just pure nonsense. But yes, indeed, Gibson sued Fernandez over, again, trademark, copyright, I'm sorry. And guess what happened? Well, they lost. Yay, Gibson. Buck, Seamus O'Brien. Someday reverb listings will say Japanese guitar pre-Gibson play authentic era. That's a good one. I like that. They lost. And the judge in the court ruled that people are educated enough to know the difference between a Greco, a Bernie, a Yamaha, and a Gibson, regardless of the headstock design. People are sophisticated enough to know that those kind of differences. So if they're sophisticated enough to know those kind of differences, a Gibson buyer is going to be a Gibson buyer. None of these other guitars are going to persuade them from buying something else. And as a matter of fact, that's been borne out. Gibsons are considered to be premium in Japan. Oh my gosh. If you think Gibsons are expensive wherever you're at, go to a Japanese shop and do the calculations over to whatever your currency is and be prepared to be blown away. They are considered to be of high regard. And they know the difference between a Bernie. they may be swallowing the lawsuit stuff, but they do know the difference between those guitars and Gibsons and Fenders and Rickenbackers, by the way. So there's your lawsuit. The lawsuit occurred in the year 2000. So how now, brown cow? Where are you going to be able to, get your lawsuit story together from? Because again, we've established, and I'm not talking out the side of my neck, this is a fact, that it was a cease and desist order in 1977. Again, that was negated by the fact that the companies, Norland, representing Gibson, and Hoshino, representing Ibanez, negated because Ibanez changed their headstock the year before the cease and desist order really got floated anyway. It was 1977. The Americans were reacting to something that had already happened in a kind of a way. And they just kind of crossed purposes there. The Japanese had already decided we're not going to do this anymore. And the Americans said, hey, what are you guys doing? And okay, there's a little misunderstanding. So much so, guys, we love what you're doing. Why don't you do it for us? And and again, you can trace this all back to Harry Rosenblum. This spark where you began to see Gibson in the Epiphone in Japan, and and Squire and all that stuff starting to come up because of Rosenblum. Rosenblum, in my opinion, is the godfather of this, without question. Without question, a very savvy business guy. I admire him a great deal. Seamus O'Brien, Yamato Gibsons are considered premium on EU American side. Yeah, they are. And inside Japan as well. If you go to Tokyo, to Shibuya, to Ishibashi, there's a section in the back where they have all their Gibsons, and the Yamato Gibsons are there, and they are quite spectacular. I have to say. Beautiful guitars, beautiful guitars. But again, okay, our true lawsuit doesn't really happen to the year 2000. So, you know, what is that? You know, what is that? So the next person, so that answers that question. What are lawsuit made in Japan guitars, and are they any good? Is the second part of that question. Well, let me get into that a little bit. Interestingly enough, it is not. I mean, sure, this Studio Lord 700 from 1988 that I just purchased uh, certainly has a value to it above and beyond its original cost of Nanama yen. That's why it's a 700. Uh, its original cost. Because, again, there is that lawsuit guitar stigma to and um, it's a multi-piece guitar. They really when we say they copied the Gibsons at that time, they really copied the Gibsons at that time. Those are pancake multi-piece necks, like three-piece necks, five-piece bodies. Now it is mahogany with a maple cap, for sure. A mahogany neck, rosewood, fretboard, all the goodies. But much like the Gibsons at the time that they were copying, it's multiple pieces. So there is that. Now, do we consider that to be a good thing or a bad thing? Well, that again, gets into what you care about wood. And we talked about wood in the last live stream. Catch that one if you haven't seen it. And my thoughts on tone woods and wood. But there is that to them. Those still aren't the ones that are considered to be premium. The ES 175, the ES 335, and these are Ibanez, by the way. So basically, these semi-hollow guitars are actually the ones from that period of time, that 1970 through, okay, we'll say 1977 period. These are the ones that are considered to be, which is ironic, that would make it the pre-lawsuit guitars. I guess we're talking about in this sense, although again, there was no lawsuit. So we're talking about this period of time. Guitars are considered to be the best. They're considered to be excellent. The Flying V is another one, if you can find one, and the Destroyer. I actually saw Ibanez Destroyer from the 70s at TC Gaki. They have it there. And not a guitar for me. But I've actually had a chance to strum, acoustically Destroy and Hold Destroyer. Great guitars. These are the ones that are they any good? These are the ones that, yeah, these are good. And these aren't the usual suspects, but usually people, like I said, will talk about the Les Paul Customs. And again, you know, the headstock is not indicative of anything because they were copying American headstocks from the 70s, early 70s. We already talked about that. So what is it about these guitars that make them good? Well, in the case of these, they were made better than the earlier versions. Again, I talked about those earlier 70s version copies of the electronics, not the same woods, not the same electronics. Basically, it looked like an ES 175, but it had very little compositional, qualities with its counterpart at Gibson. But these later on, they began to pay attention to that kind of detail. What was the wood used? Was it multi pieces? Okay, well, multi pieces, they're doing it. We'll do it too. But somehow they did it better. You know. And so what? criteria make these good are again things that are specious, in my opinion. They're pre or post a lawsuit that didn't occur. They're better than, which is a term that always makes me wince a little bit. Um, yeah. Um, so no, there's no such thing as a made in Japan lawsuit guitar. And are they any good? It depends. It's a crapshoot, just like any other guitar made in any other country during a period of time. Are your chances of finding a great, good, well-made guitar strong? Is the force strong with this one? Yes, the force is strong with this one. There is a very likely possibility that if you find uh, a Japanese-made guitar from the period of time, I would say about 77, 78, until, you know, now. Chances are you're probably going to get yourself a winner. Winner, winner, chicken dinner. But by no means let anybody put a premium on one of these made in Japan guitars with this spurless, lawsuit era story. Don't let them do it to you, and don't fall for it. Now that you know this information, it is incumbent upon you, when somebody says lawsuit guitar, you say to them, ask them the question. It's a really simple one. What lawsuit are you talking about? What's this lawsuit? Yeah. And we can slowly get the truth of they're out there, and we can look at these guitars for what they are, and not based upon, again, spurless, coulda, shoulda, wouldas, could be, maybe, possibly, and with a sprinkle of leprechaun dust. It's just. I mean, we gotta cut out this leprechaun dust nonsense, man. It's bad enough we got gas. We don't need the gas with leprechaun dust on it. Then we are truly screwed. We are going to be in the back alley with newspapers as blankets if we keep this up, metaphorically. Yeah, man, dig that. So again, the answer to these two questions are there's no such thing, and it depends. Just like everything else. But we do have to break free of these myths. We've got to break free of the Tonewood myth. We've got to break free of these lawsuit guitar myths. We've got to break free of. We got to play honor to a guy like Mr. Rosenblum, who really kicked this whole thing off. You know, we hear about Seymour Duncan and how and DiMarzio and all these cats, and sing them high praises. Well, anybody got any praise for old Freddie? Anybody? I know I do, because he really is the godfather of all this. He's the one that kicked this off, and it's not a name that you hear, but it should be one that you're familiar with, especially if you love made in Japan guitars. Not for the sake of this lawsuit thing or not. Ooh, they're because they're so good that Gibson, man, they threaten them, man. They say, hey, we're gonna start World War III with you guys. No, it was nothing like that at all. Again, the quality was better than, of course, really honestly, what they were doing in Norland at the time. Ironically, they were copying what they were doing at Norling at the time and doing it better. Norland at the time and doing it better. The ironies of that. And Gibson, again, another thing it's just like those guys, man. It's like, you know, cut off your nose to spite your face types that seem to always buy that company in one way or the other. But don't let these this leprechaun dust stories in any way, shape, or form influence your buying, your purchases. Buy it because you know buy it because you researched it. What pickups are on the Studio Lord 700, for example? Well, I had to look that up. There are Yamaha EL3s. I'm sorry, E3s. Now, there's a lot of, again, we're talking about 1980, so we're talking about a crap load long time ago. But we are looking at the fact that there's very little data on what these actually are. Are they Alnico 5s? Are they Alnico 2s? We have a name for them, at least. But we're not sure what they are. And that's kind of the fun of these guitars, too. I know the difference between an Alnico 2 and an Alnico 5. So the minute I plug it into my Laney amp and kick in the bridge, I will immediately know. I'll set the pickup heights on it, to my spec where I like it at, and I will immediately know what it is. Uh, but in terms of looking that up to get official Yamaha data from 1980, even in Japanese, no. And that's one of the fun things about these guitars is getting one, especially this one. It's in immaculate condition. Guys, I only buy clean stuff. I only buy clean vintage stuff in its original case, and that's exciting. But you know, it's because of the fun of it. I didn't buy it because of the lawsuit guitar. I'm going to advertise the shit out of it as a lawsuit guitar. And I'm kidding. I wouldn't do that. I think that actually takes away from it a little bit. It's almost like I'm making an excuse for why it's good. It's good because it's good in most cases, not because some secret plan by the Japanese to 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 re-win the Second War by taking over the American guitar market. It's not that kind of scenario. They just really make good stuff that last. They really do. My mom has this sun cat. It's a cat that's made in Japan. It's run off a solar dial, and you sit in the sun, and its tail just goes back and forth like that. Um, she got that 20 years ago. That thing is still sitting in the window every day the sun comes up. Its tail still moves. That's no lie. That's no lie. Amazing, amazing quality of stuff that the Japanese produce. I know it because I lived there for 18 years. So I know. But it really is incumbent upon you to do your homework. See, this always gets back, just like with the Tonewoods things last live stream. I always try to bring these things back to doing your homework. If you do your homework, then they cannot pull the wool over your eyes with these terms: lawsuit, Tonewood, you know, pronouncing the vowels in these tulips, whatever that was last time. Blues fan, I'm running a little late this evening. Hey, better late than never, Blues fan. I really do appreciate you showing up. Unfortunately, we are getting close to the end here, but you're more than welcome again to look at the live stream. We just basically, I'll wrap it up, sum it up by saying there's no such thing as a lawsuit guitar because there was no lawsuit. And are they any good? Just like any other made in Korea, made in China, made in the States, made in Mexico, made in da 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 da. Da. It depends upon the guitar. And it's really luck of the draw. Do you stand a good chance of getting a good guitar that's made in Japan? Yes, you stand an excellent chance. That's why they have the reputation. Not because, again, they were doing some, nefarious shenanigans. It's because they were actually doing their work and they were doing it as they do. They were doing it too well to the point where it's embarrassing the Norland Corporation at the time. So there's that. But we have to, again, you guys, again, all 11 of you, well, there's 13 at one point, that were watching this, and all you guys out there who are going to watch this in the rerun, now you know. Now, whenever you see a YouTube video that talks about, lawsuit guitars, I saw one reverb. When I was researching this a little bit, I saw a reverb. How many? I wanted to count how many, because again, I talked about that echo chamber that you get in YouTube, but there's some things as a channel it's fundamentally that you'll do. You'll do a talk about Les Pauls. You'll do a talk about Tonewood. You'll do a talk about eventually maybe made in Japan guitars. And it's just one of those things that I hadn't done, and so it's an okay topic for a channel to do once. I think really. But again, this discussion tonight is not the normal answers that you hear to that question out there. I'm loudly proclaiming out there to the world there is no such thing as a lawsuit made in Japan guitar because there never was a lawsuit. Can't have a lawsuit guitar if there's no lawsuit. And by the way, the lawsuit that you think didn't occur in the 70s occurred in the 2000s. So there's your lawsuit. No, the 70s was cease and desist order. So, again, a little bit of knowledge goes a long way. A little bit of knowledge goes a long way. And now you guys have that knowledge. Guess what? You're responsible for doing a little bit. Was Mike BSing me tonight? Was he making this up? Well, guess what? He was, wow, I can't believe he was telling the truth. There really was no lawsuit. Well, now it's incumbent upon me to, if somebody brings that up, to pass that knowledge on. And I think eventually, in about another 100 years, we can finally put this one to rest. It's going to take that long because there's too many cats out there they're too invested financially in making that one work. And that's the truth of it. The reason why it stuck around is because people are making money off of suckers. So don't be a sucker. I got the studio Lord because it is an excellent example. 1980 is the creme de la creme year when it comes to Japanese Les Pauls, in my opinion. So the 81, 82, 83, that period, but 80 is and to get one in mint condition in its original case is exciting, but it's not because it's a lawsuit guitar. It's just because it's an awesome guitar in itself. I'm sure it is. It's been well kept. So we shall see. Yeah. Dig that, guys. Just dig that. Chew on that one. Ponder upon it. Look into it. Dig it. Dig it. I think the term dig it really means to get into it, to really dig deep into the concept. So dig it. And go to town with it with family and friends at dinner. Coming up, guys, I have invested in a new camera for my regular show because I did find a replacement battery for my going on a decade. I've been using this camera for ever since I started YouTube. So it's been a while now. Has it been? It feels like a decade. I have to really go back and see how long I've been doing this. I think at least since 2017, 2016. Anyway, I really can't remember. But it's time to retire that one, and I got another one on its way. So I'm excited about that. And of course, it's going to have to get its test run. So I will think about something that I can do for the inaugural use of that camera when it does arrive. I hope, again, things like going wireless, buying a new camera, these things I hope to improve the quality of the images that I'm putting out on this channel. Uh, and and so that's thrilling. So you have that to look forward to. Hopefully, it'll come this week. We'll see. If not, there'll be no regular content until I get this new camera because I got a new battery for my old one, but I'm going to retire it. Actually, I'm going to use it actually just for personal use, not for shoot. Because it's just the wear and tear on that thing, and it's actually a nice camera. So there's that. So I'm kind of excited about that. Um, yeah, guys. I think with that, where are we at here? Yeah, right at 1 hour. I think with that tonight, guys, I think we're going to let it go. Now, I don't. I hope that that this takeaway that I have has not offended those of you who put some premium on that lawsuit thing, but I hope it encouraged you to put a premium on the artistic handiwork of the Japanese men and women who put it together in the first place. That's what you should be celebrating. Michael Watson, great info, Mike. Really enjoyed it. All right, guys, that's it for tonight. I hope you enjoyed this live stream. I want to thank you so much for showing up. If you want to support this channel, again, the best direct way to do it, if you're not familiar with this, I don't ask for super chats. I don't have PayPal, whatever, YouTube, whatever. I don't have any of that stuff. What I do have are two great albums, Asanoki 1 and 2, that I wrote, produced, and performed that are available on boy, my tongue is getting thick. It's getting late. Bandcamp.com, bandcamp.com. Type in Asanoki and look at those two records. If you find something there musically that turns you on, buy the single. If you like the whole album, buy the whole album. If you like them both, buy them both. And that way you are directly helping this channel. And it is a pleasure to be able to write music and produce and put it out there for your enjoyment so that you can support this channel. I really do appreciate if you do have the time to go take a look at that. So let's do that if you can. Uh, Thank you, Wiley. I appreciate it if you do. Check it out. There's something for everybody there. I love rock music. That's my love of my life is rock. I have to tell you. So if you like rock music too, check it out. All right, folks, you have a good one. And to all of you new folks who tuned in this evening, thank you so much for showing your support by tuning in and pitching in the conversation. You're always welcome. To all you regular guys out there, God bless you for supporting this channel just by showing up. That's the first way you can really support is just by showing up. And it means a lot to me that you always do and support this channel. So you guys take care. We will be back with a live stream on Sunday. Until then, you take care. Bye bye.